Now let's start with the next major concept that we want to do, and it's about solving equations, right? Solving simple equations, manipulating them and solving them. So let's start with some simple examples first of all. Now, sometimes you have very complicated looking equations with a lot of unknowns like this, but when you simplify them, it becomes relatively straightforward, right? So there are like 4 unknowns here, A, B, C, and D, but what you will do is you would start simplifying them, and eventually what happens is some of them start cancelling out, right? So whenever you have equations like these, what you do is you combine like terms, right? A terms with A terms, B terms with B terms, and so on, and try to simplify those equations, okay? So in this case, for instance, when you simplify this, what do you get? You get 2A plus 2B plus 4C plus 6D plus 2, that equals 3A plus 2B plus 4C plus 6D. And now when you take all terms to one side, you see what happens. 2B minus 2B, they will get cancelled. 4C minus 4C, that's also going to get cancelled. 6D minus 6D, that will also get cancelled. And what are you left with? 3A and 2A. You can take 2A to the other side, and that leaves you with A on the other side, and you get 2 from this, A equals 2. So it looked like a very complicated equation because there was only one equation, 4 unknowns, but when you actually start simplifying it, it's a lot simple. It's fairly simple because terms start cancelling out like this. All right? Make sense? No problems with this? So that's one thing that you need to keep in mind. Whenever you have to solve equations, start by combining the like terms. It could be different variables, like in this case it was A, B, C, and D. Sometimes it's the same variable with different powers. So for example, you could have x squared terms, x cubed terms, x terms. You combine the like terms and simplify them. Okay? Now, let's have a look at this. You have this equation, square root of AB equals A minus B. And they're asking, given that A is greater than 0 and B is greater than 0, none of them can be negative, give which of the following equations is equivalent to this? Now, what have they done in the options there? They've basically squared everything, right? So you can see the square root has been eliminated. You can't find square root in any of those terms, so basically they've squared both sides. Now when you square both sides of an equation, how does that work? You square this side, it becomes AB. When you square the other side, can you just write A square minus B square? You can't. Whenever you apply an operation on an equation, you apply that operation on the whole thing. It's not just about squares. Any operation that you apply on both sides of an equation, you apply that on the whole thing. So in this case, rather than doing A square minus B square, it's going to be A minus B whole squared. Right? That whole thing is going to be squared like this. Make sense? Can you see any of those options there? You have AB equal to A minus B whole squared. Not right now. It's clearly not the first one. We eliminated that option, right? What about the other ones? Can you figure out which one this is? You'll have to simplify this now, right? How do you simplify this thing? AB equals A square minus 2AB plus B squared. And then you have A square plus B square, and the options that are left, you see you either want A square plus B square or A square minus B square on the right side. What can you have on the right side? You can have A square plus B square on the right side. This is minus 2AB, that goes to the other side and becomes 3AB. Which option is that? That's D. Does that make sense? Now, the important thing to remember here is whenever you apply any operation on an equation, you have to apply that on the whole expression, not on individual terms. That does not work. All right? Make sense? Okay, let's move on. Another example of that. So you have this equation that relates the positive numbers x, y, and z. Which equation correctly expresses x in terms of y and z? Now, what does this statement mean? x in terms of y and z. What does that mean? Express x in terms of y and z. How do you understand that? You need to make x the subject. X needs to be made the subject. How can you do that now? How do you make x the subject? How do we start? Any idea? Take y to the other side. You're saying we write it like this: square root of x plus 3 equals z minus y. Does everyone agree to this? And then we take square on both sides. Okay. So now we square both sides like this. Couldn't we just square both sides right here? Could we do that? We could, but it would make it very complicated to evaluate the square, right? Because you have 3 terms and you have a square on top of that, it becomes extremely complicated. So when you're applying squares, try to simplify the equation in a way such that taking the square becomes simpler, right? So when you take y to the other side, now taking a square on both sides is going to be much simpler. Is that okay? How can you make x the subject now? On the left side, the square root gets cancelled with the square and you have x plus 3. On the right side, you have z squared minus 2zy or 2yz plus y squared. Do we need to do that actually? We don't, because we have this option here as well. So we can actually just keep it this way: z minus y whole squared, and on the other side we have x plus 3, and then x equals z minus y whole squared minus 3, and this is what we get here. Does this make sense? Any problems? Now it's pretty clear that D is not correct, right? But in your actual exam, when you figure this out and you figured out that this is the correct answer, can you also figure out that these two are incorrect? Are you sure these are incorrect? Are you sure A and B are incorrect? Can you guess it there? Yeah, but maybe after expanding it becomes something like that? It does not, because expand करने के बाद you get a zy term as well, and you can't see that here. So that eliminates the other options. कि जब expand करेंगे उसको, you would have z squared minus 2zy plus y squared minus 3 on the other side. Since you have this term as well, you can't see that term in any of these terms. That means they're also incorrect. Alright, so whenever you attempt a problem, especially while practicing in the exam, you should not do that for every question. You should first attempt all the questions, and then at the end, if you have extra time, you can do this, that you figure out why the other answers are incorrect, just to be sure about your answers. But when you're practicing, it's extremely important. Whenever you attempt any question, you should think about the correct answer, why this is correct, and also think about why the others are wrong. That's a very important process while you're basically practicing. It's extremely important to go through that process. You have 4 options. You should know why one of them is correct and why each one of the other 3 is incorrect. Okay? That's how you can make your score better. Otherwise, if you get the questions correct and don't think about why the other options are wrong, it is possible कि अगर next time उस तरह का कुछ similar question आए तो आप उसमें stuck हो जाएं, अगर बहुत similar options आ जाए उस तरह के. ठीक है? So please make sure to do this. All right. No problems here? Let's move on. Whenever you take square roots, you always have to put plus minus. Do not forget that, right? Whenever you take square root, you have to put plus minus. So if you have this equation, for instance, x plus 3 whole square equals 121, It says what's the sum of the two possible values of x. How do you solve this equation? You can take square root in both sides. When you take square root in both sides, that gives you x plus 3 equals plus minus 11. And you get two equations from that, x plus 3 equals 11 or x plus 3 equals minus 11, x equals 8 or x equals minus 14. These are the two solutions that you have. But did they ask you for the solutions here? What's the final result that you write down there? They're asking you for the sum of the two possible values of x. What's the sum? What's the sum? Minus 6, right? 8 minus 14, that is negative 6. Make sense? No problems? Zara, Zainab, Rohma, you guys are very tired. सुबह से बहुत classes नहीं है. ब्रेक मिल गया, अब आपको थोड़ा सा फोकस कर लें. सम आपके पास माइनस 6 आ गया, ठीक है? Alright, let's have a look at this now. When fractions are said equal, you cross multiply. Now, this is another thing that you have to do quite often. You have multiple fractions in an equation, and it says the given equations relates the positive numbers a, b and c, which equation correctly expresses a in terms of b and c. A in terms of b and c, what does that mean? A should be the subject. How do you make a the subject? You have two fractions. What do we do? क्या करें? क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई, लेकिन अभी तो नहीं कर सकते क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई. We first have to take one of them to the other side. So it gives you 5c over a plus 2b. And now you can cross multiply. And that gives you 5 into a plus 2b equals 5bc. Now you need to make a the subject. Simplify this. That gives you 5a plus 10b equals 5bc. And a equals 5. In fact, we can make it simpler. How can you make this equation simpler? Okay, it was not 2b, it was bc. I wrote that one there. I'm sorry. This was bc. That makes it 5bc. Okay, can we simplify this equation somehow? अच्छा, मैंने क्या गलत किया वहाँ पे? 2 उधर था, I'm sorry. This was 2. Okay, let me check this again. 2 over b, that equals 5c over a plus bc. I've copied that correctly. And now when we cross multiply, we have 2 into a plus bc. And that equals 5bc. So on the left side, we have 2a plus 2bc. What do we do next? We can take bc to the other side, and that gives us 5 minus 2, which is 3bc. 2a equals 3bc. You need to make a the subject. 2 se divide kar dein on the other side, and that gives you 3 over 2 times bc. Is that an option? Is there an option like that? Yeah. Option B. Yes, then. If we take 2 to the other side, you can do that. So if you take 2 to the other side, you're saying you have 5bc here, and here you want to take 2 to the other side and have a plus bc here. Okay, and then a equals 5bc over 2 minus bc. This is correct, but is that any of these options? Not right now. So that means you'll have to change it slightly now. Can you take LCM? When you take LCM, that gives you 5bc minus 2bc, right? This 2 gets multiplied with bc, divided by 2, and that gives you 3bc divided by 2. And that's the same answer that we got there. All right? Fairly straightforward stuff, right? Nothing complicated. Can we move on? Fractions में इस तरह से आपको अक्सर क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई करना होता है. अच्छा. Let's look at this now. Again, you want to express A in terms of B and C, so you need to make A the subject. What do we do now? How do you make A the subject? So we start by taking 3A plus C to the other side, and that gives us 3AB plus BC equal to A. Alright? Now what do you want to make the subject? A. Whatever variable you want to make this as the subject, you take that variable to one side, everything else on the other side. Alright? So you get 3AB minus A, that equals minus BC. And now, since you want to make A the subject, you have to take A common. Right? You take A common from these two terms, and that leaves you with 3B minus 1 inside, and that equals minus BC. So A equals minus BC over 3B minus 1. Do you see that as any one of the options? Minus BC over 3B minus 1. Well, you don't. Now this is an extremely important thing to remember. Whenever you have something like this, A minus B over C minus D, for instance, this is equivalent to B minus A over D minus C, right? Because we can go from the first form to the next, to the second form by just multiplying and dividing this fraction with negative 1. We can multiply and divide by any number, right? If we multiply and divide the numerator and if we multiply and divide this fraction by minus 1, in the numerator we get B minus A, right? A minus B into minus 1, that becomes minus A plus B, which is B minus A, right? Similarly, when you multiply the denominator by negative 1, that gives us D minus C, right? It was C minus D, multiplied by negative 1, becomes D minus C. So this thing is equivalent to, look at the options. You have 3B minus 1. In one of the options, you have 1 minus 3B. You can actually go from this form to this form. How do you do that? You multiply and divide by negative 1. Make sense? In the numerator, that gives you BC. In the denominator, minus 3B plus 1. That's the same thing as 1 minus 3B. And that's the first option there. Does this make sense? Yes. Okay. So if you just wanted to make A the subject, this is correct. Okay. But the problem is we don't see that as any of the options here. So we are trying to look for an option that is equivalent to this. Okay. We can actually modify this fraction a bit by just multiplying and dividing by minus 1. So we can actually multiply and divide by any number. So for example, if I have x over y, I can multiply and divide the fraction by 6 and say this is the same as 6x over 6y, right? I can multiply it by 2, 2x over 2y, it's still the same expression. I can multiply it by negative, minus x over minus y, it's still the same expression. So we can multiply and divide by the same number in a fraction, and the fraction does not change. So in this case, what we're doing is we're saying we have gotten minus bc over 3b minus 1. This is actually equivalent to this because we can get from this form to that form by just multiplying and dividing by negative 1. All right? Any problems with this? No? Okay. Think of this for 30 seconds. Let me know what we can do here. Let me remove that hint for you. Okay, so I've seen that. X squared into x minus 3 minus x minus 3. What's the smallest solution to this equation? G. Nimra, are you done? Alina. You're Alina, right? What do you think? क्या कर सकता है? Anyone who's done? What's the question? What's the smallest solution to the given equation? Yes? How do we solve this equation? Now sometimes you end up going this way, that you say let's simplify the equation, and that gives you x cubed minus x squared minus x plus 3 equal to 0. And then there isn't much that you can do with it, right? It's a cubic equation that you do not know how to solve. There was a 3 there as well. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to me today. This was x cubed minus 3x squared minus x plus 3. Yeah. That's the equation that you get. Do you know how to solve this? No. Can we do something else? So by the way, you can actually solve this equation as well. And you know how to do that? No? Calculator. You can solve cubic equations on your calculator as well. Just like we solve quadratic equations, you can just put this on your calculator, and that will give you most likely 3 solutions or 2 solutions to this equation. You can try that. Cubic equation solve कर लें calculator पे, and you can get the answers directly from that. My calculator is still not working here, so I can't do much. Try to find another app. किसी को पता है scientific calculator की कोई app और? No? Okay, it's working. Wow. Acha. So what we can do is we can go to menu, equation, polynomial. It's a degree 3 equation, right? Cubic equation. And now you just input the coefficients. The coefficient of x cube was 1. Input 1, press the equal to button. Coefficient of x squared is negative 3. Input negative 3, press the equal to button. Coefficient of x is minus 1, so input minus 1. And then the constant term is 3. Is that okay? So we just input these values. And now press the equal to button. You get the first solution, minus 1. Press the equal to button again, you get another solution, 3. Press the equal to button again, you get another solution, that is 1. -1, 3 and 1, you are looking for the smallest solution was that -1, and that's what you write there. Okay? So equation solving becomes much simpler with a calculator directly like that. Can you think of another way of solving this? Can you spot these two terms? These are both the same, x minus 3, x minus 3. You can actually take them common. You can take x minus 3 common here. Because remember, whenever you're solving an equation, we try to factorize that, right? And you can see x minus 3 and x minus 3. We can take x minus 3 common. If we take x minus 3 common, what are we left with from the first term? X squared. And from the second term? Minus 1. Right? And now you say either x minus 3 equals 0 or x squared minus 1 equals 0, x equals 3 or x squared equals 1 or x equals plus minus 1. Because remember, when you take square root, you have to put plus minus. So you have three solutions, plus 1, minus 1 and 3. And the smallest solution therefore is minus 1. That is what you're going to input there. This is a fill-in question in which you have to write down the answer. You don't have any options given, right? Make sense? Okay, let's move on. Now, sometimes what happens is, and this is something where calculator is not going to be helpful. They give you equations like these. 3x plus 9y equals 9. Now, you cannot solve this equation. It's one equation, two unknowns. There's no way to solve this equation. You can't find the values of x and y. But they're not asking you for the value of x or y. They're asking you for the value of x plus 3y. Okay? You want the value of x plus 3y. What you're going to do now is, you're going to find the value of x plus 3y directly from this equation. By kind of thinking of it like this, that you want to make x plus 3y the subject. That means x plus 3y should be on one side, everything else on the other side. How can you do that? This is 3x plus 9y. You can take 3 common. What does that leave you with? X plus 3y. And that's exactly what you want there, x plus 3y. And that therefore gives you x plus 3y equal to 9 over 3, which is 3. And that's your final answer. That's the value of x plus 3y. Does that make sense? So sometimes they don't ask you for values of a particular variable, but some other expression, right? X plus 3y पूरा आपको evaluate करना था. What about the second one? That's fairly straightforward. They're asking you for the value of 3 minus x over 2. So basically, this whole thing should be on one side, everything else on the other side. Right? So what do you get from this? 3 minus x over 2 into 4. You can take 5 to the other side, that becomes 28. And then just divide 4 on the other side. And that gives you 7. So that's your final answer. You write 7 here. Make sense? This is another type of problem. You cannot, in the second case, you could actually find the value of x as well. So one possibility could be to find the value of x first, and then input that value of x here to find that value, right? But that will take much longer. It's much quicker to find the value of this expression directly, rather than finding x first and then inputting here. That will take longer. All right? Okay. Let's move on. Similar example, slightly more complicated. You have x over y equal to 3 given. And you want the value of y over 2x. How can we do this? Again, it's not possible to solve this equation. You can't find the value of x or y. But you have to find the value of y over 2x somehow. Can you rearrange this equation somehow that on one side you have y over 2x? Can all of you try this? Take 30 seconds, try this. Bring y over 2x to one side somehow. Anyone who's done? Yes? A, 1 over 6. Anyone else getting the same answer? 1 over 6. Anyone getting a different answer? It's not that difficult. You want y over 2x on one side. Y needs to be in the numerator, x needs to be in the denominator. How can we start? We can say, let's take y to the right side. So it comes in the numerator, x to the right side as well, that goes to the denominator. Bring this 3 on the other side, that gives you 1 over 3. Is this clear to everyone? Is this clear to everyone, this step? So I've taken y to the other side, it goes to the numerator, x goes to the denominator, and similarly 3 goes down here, it becomes 1 over 3. Now we want to make it y over 2x. So in order to get 2 in the denominator, I can divide by 2 on both sides, right? So I can multiply the denominator by 2 essentially. So I get 2 here and 2 here, and that gives me y over 2x equal to 1 over 6, so it should be 8. Make sense? So whatever expression you are given for which you have to find the value, you just try to make that the subject somehow. Take that thing on one side, everything else on the other side. So on one side of the equation you want this thing. वो आपने किसी भी तरह से मैनिपुलेट करके इक्वेशन को मल्टीप्लाई करके डिवाइड करके कोई चीज़ ऐड सब्ट्रैक्ट करके एक साइड पे वो बनाना. Once you have that thing on one side, the other side is going to give you the value for that. Is this all right? Okay, let's move on. Now this is very important. Solve this equation. What's a possible solution to the given equation? Can all of you try this? 3. What's another possible solution to this equation? 5, 3 or 5. Does everyone agree to that? 3 or 5, both are solutions to this equation. So how are you solving it? You're basically doing something like this. You're saying, let's multiply x minus 5 to the other side. And that becomes 0 basically, x minus 5 into 0. And you're left with x minus 5 into x minus 3 equal to 0. And you get x equal to 5 and x equal to 3 from that. Is everyone getting the same solutions? Yes? No? Yes? Why can't we cut x minus 5 and x minus 5 and that will not give us this solution? That will only give us x equals 3. How do we know if we have to cut or not? They have asked us for a possible solution. That means it could be 2 solutions as well. You can write any one of them. In fill-in questions, you can have multiple solutions, but you have to write down only one of them. So it is possible that both are solutions. How do we know both are correct or not? Whenever you solve an equation, try to verify if the answers work by inputting them in the equation as well. X equals 5 does not work. Why is that? So I'm telling you x equals 5 is not a solution of this equation. Can you spot why? Because if you input x equal to 5 there, what you get is 0. X minus 5 minus 5 becomes 0. Let me actually write that fully. You get 5 minus 5 multiplied by 5 minus 3 divided by 5 minus 5. And that's 0 over 0. What's 0 over 0? It's undefined. You cannot divide by 0. Division by 0 is not possible. So x equals 5 does not work. And this is something that we'll actually see later on as well. Whenever you have a fraction, keep in mind that the denominator cannot be 0. X equals 5 is a value that's going to break this function. So that is not possible. So if you solve it this way, by multiplying x minus 5 on the other side, you end up getting two solutions. But this is incorrect. This is called an extraneous solution. As in, you're getting this by a valid working, but when you actually try inputting this back in the equation, it does not work. Sometimes you end up getting extra answers, जो असल में उसके solutions नहीं होते. How do you figure them out? You have to input your answers back into the equation to check if they work or not. If there's only one answer, most likely that's going to be correct, right? Because you have to write something at least, right? कितनी होगा कि कुछ भी नहीं आप लिख सकते वहाँ पे. If you're getting multiple answers, verify them if they work or not. Alright? Because it is possible sometimes that one of those multiple answers does not work. Like in this case, x equals 5 does not work. This is an extraneous solution. An extra answer that does not work in the original equation. So the only answer is x equals 3. Only 3 is going to get you the mark there. Okay? Let's move on. Okay, what about this now? Square root of x equals minus 4. Can all of you try solving this equation? Try solving this equation and see what you get. Under root x equals negative 4. Yes? Sorry? How do we solve this equation? What process होएगा? We square both sides, right? Let's square both sides. When you square both sides, we get, let me actually keep the original equation as it is. The original equation was under root x equal to minus 4. I have squared both sides and that gives me x equal to 16. Is that a solution to the equation? Is that a solution to the equation? Yes or no? So by the way, probably you're not aware of this notation, so let me actually explain this as well. If you have x squared equal to 16, let's suppose, x squared equal to 16. When we take square root on both sides, what do we get? X equals plus minus under root of 16. And then we break it down into two parts. X equals under root 16 and x equals minus under root 16. What does this give us? 4. What does this give us? Minus 4. Under root 16 is not plus minus 4. Plus minus is outside the under root here. So if you already have a square root written somewhere, so for example, if you have y equal to under root 4, what's that equal to? This is just 2. If it was plus minus 2, it would have been written like this, plus minus under root 4, and that would have given you plus minus 2. But if you have y equals minus under root 4, that is y equals minus 2. If you have y equals plus under root 4, that's just y equal to plus 2. So if the under root is already there, then you just take the sign that is there. It's either positive or negative. When you take square root yourself, then you have to put plus minus. So in this example, we had x square equal to 16. We took square root ourselves and we put plus minus there. In the other example, on the right side here, this one and this one, the under root is already there. If you have a negative sign there, you keep it negative. If there's a positive sign there, you keep it positive. Make sense? When you take square root yourself, that is when you put plus minus. Otherwise, it's just the sign that is already there. Now, let's get back to this equation. Under root x equals minus 4. We were trying to solve this equation and we got 16 as the answer. It does not satisfy the original equation. You can input that here. That gives you under root 16. What is under root 16? It's plus 4. It does not satisfy the equation. Because this under root is already there. It's not something that we have put there. So when we take square root ourselves, we have to put plus minus. If it's already there, if there's no sign outside, that means it's positive. Agar negative hota, they would have specified negative there. If it was negative, they would have clearly written minus here outside. Make sense? So let's get back to this now. Extraneous solutions can often occur when you're working with square roots. Because when you're trying to solve such equations, you square both sides. And after squaring, the answers that you get, in this case x equals 16, sometimes they do not satisfy the original equation. In this case, it does not satisfy the original equation. So this equation has no solutions. This equation has no solutions. Make sense? Any problem with this? ये बहुत important है, याद रखना. When you take square root yourself, you put plus minus. If it's already there, you just trust the sign that is there. It's positive, it remains positive. If it was supposed to be negative, they would have put negative outside here. Alright? So in this case as well, x equals 16 is an extraneous solution. It's an extra solution. This equation does not have any answer, does not have any solution. तो अब ये question किस तरह से आएगा? अब इसमें ये तो नहीं कह सकता वो कि solve this equation because that would not have any answer. They would ask this problem like this. They would say, how many solutions does this equation have? And then you would have options 0, 1, 2, 3, something like that. So you have to select 0 there. Okay? Make sense? It does not have any solution. Try this. X plus 4 into x minus 9 equals x plus 4. How do you solve this equation? Gee, anyone? What's the sum of the solutions to the given equation? Yes? Nirma, you done? What's the sum of the solutions? Five, sum of the two solutions. Could be. Okay, let's try solving this. Now, one idea that you might think of is that you divide by x plus 4 on the other side, right? Okay. So you divide by x plus 4 here. What are you left with on the other side? 0? 1. When you're dividing by x plus 4, that means you're dividing both sides by x plus 4. So that side also gets divided by x plus 4. And that gives you 1. On the left side you have x minus 9. On the right side you have 1. And that gives you x equal to 10. This is incorrect. You cannot do this. Why can you not do this? We cannot divide by x plus 4 because x plus 4 is unknown to us, right? What if the value of x was negative 4? We would have 0 in the denominator and that breaks this equation. We never divide by variables. Okay? We never divide by variables. We cannot divide by x or anything in terms of x unless we are sure that is not 0. Here we are not sure. X could be minus 4 and that makes x plus 4 0 and it would be undefined. Does that make sense? So how do we actually solve this then? If you cannot divide by x plus 4, the correct way of doing this would be, so this is wrong, you cannot do this. How would you approach this? You would bring x plus 4 to the left side as well. When you subtract, you have 0 left on the other side now, right? And now you can take x plus 4 common, just like we did in one of the previous examples. We can take x plus 4 common. That leaves us with x minus 9 minus 1 inside. Alright, so that's x plus 4 into x minus 10 equal to 0. X equals minus 4 or x equals 10. What's the sum? Sum is 6. So what is happening here? This is an example of a missing solution. If you do it like this, you get one of the correct solutions, yes, x equals 10, but you miss one possible solution which was x equals negative 4. You've missed out on that if you do it that way. And why does that happen? When you divide by a variable. Okay? Just like if you had, for instance, x squared plus 4x equal to 0. Let's say you had this equation. How do you solve this equation? You can take x common and that leaves you with x plus 4 inside. Now one idea could be that you divide by x on the other side and you're left with x plus 4 equal to 0 and x equals minus 4. But that leaves you with one less solution, because if it's a factorized form like this, इसका जो proper तरीका होता करने का, it should have been like this: either x equals 0 or x plus 4 equals 0. So we get two solutions from this: x equals 0 and x equals minus 4. If we divide by x like that, we miss out on one solution. So variable से divide नहीं करना. If something is unknown, you cannot divide by that. You try to factorize and solve it like this. तो ये नहीं कर सकते. This is not allowed. Make sense? Now these types of problems often come like this, that they ask you for the number of solutions. Now in this case you should know that it's 2 solutions, not 1, right? In the previous case as well, it's 2 solutions and not 1. So sometimes you get extra roots, we talked about that. In order to avoid that, you have to verify your answers. In order to avoid missing solutions, remember never to divide by a variable. Unless you know for sure कि उसकी value 0 नहीं हो सकती. ठीक है? Is this all right? Okay. So this is just a summary of that. Dividing by an expression can cause you to miss solutions, right? In that case, we missed out on x equals -4 solution. Multiplying by something can sometimes give you extra solutions. So you need to keep in mind both things. Divide तो आपने बिल्कुल नहीं करना किसी एक्सप्रेशन के साथ unless you know for sure कि वो 0 नहीं है. और जब मल्टीप्लाई आप कर देते हैं तो एंड पे चेक करना है if you are getting any extra answers or not. Okay. Now these extraneous solutions often come when you have equations involving square roots, like we saw above, right? Square roots में होता है, fractions में अक्सर होता है, like in this case, right? जब 0 denominator में बन रहा, वहाँ पे हमारे पास extra solutions इस तरह से आ जाते हैं कभी-कभी. So you just need to keep these things in mind कि जब भी आपके पास answers आ रहे हैं multiple, plug them back in the equation and check if they actually work in the original equation or not.